Okay. Morning. So, let's pass these around. I've done this before, that would make sense. Okay, so Parshas Vayigash. In this week's Parsha, we have the drama of Yosef and his brothers, perhaps better known as Yosef and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. The saga continues. And one of the things that happens in this Parsha is that, right, so we pick up basically this Parsha, it's Vayigash, which means, and he approached, and it picks up where basically Yehuda, Yosef's brother, is approaching Yosef, not knowing who Yosef is, and getting really upset at him and saying, you know, you drove us crazy, you harassed us, we accommodated, we did everything you asked us to bring Binyamin, we brought him down, it was hard, we did it, and now you're taking advantage, you're not keeping your word, etc. So Yehuda gets very upset. And then basically after that, Yosef decides it's time to let them know what's up. Good morning, welcome back. And to tell them who he is, that he's their brother, etc. So that happens. Is this recording, by the way? No, it's not. I'm going to record it to the cloud. So Yosef tells them who he is. And then at that point, once Yosef tells them who he is, lets them know that he's Yosef, etc. Obviously, the brothers, Yosef, the brothers get really, really embarrassed. I mean, imagine how they feel. The last time they saw him, as far as they knew, they literally sold him into slavery. They sold their brother to random strangers for some cash. So just imagine the humiliation and shame they felt when he was like, hey guys, it's me, what's up? Right? Like they were mortified. And so then Yosef right away says, it's okay, relax. Just understand this wasn't about you. This needed to happen. Hashem made this happen. Hashem engineered things in such a way that I would end up here in Mitzrayim so that I could be here and facilitate the accumulation of food and storage, etc., so that you guys would be able to eat now. If you hadn't sold me into slavery, you'd all be hungry and there'd be no food available. So like, relax. This wasn't your fault. It needed to happen. It was going to happen anyway. Hashem would have made it happen. You don't have to feel so guilty. And after saying that, so once Yosef tells them that, you know, there's a reason I'm here, and you know it had to happen in order for you to be able to be sustained, etc. It was Hashem's plan. Don't feel guilty. He then continues and says that, you know, this is why Hashem made me the ruler over all of Mitzrayim. Thank you. He says, that's why Hashem made me ruler over Mitzrayim. And then the next thing he says is, he continues and kind of reiterates, Hashem made me a ruler over all of Mitzrayim. And then he continues immediately and says, go tell Yaakov Avinu to come down to Mitzrayim now. Like, there's no reason for him to be up there. I'm the ruler here. This is my land. He needs to come here. He'll be taken care of. He'll have food, etc. I'll take care of him. So now, I guess we could go inside for a little. Let's go inside, second paragraph in the Hebrew. Mizeh muvan. Based on the fact that after telling them that he was there in order to make sure they have food and etc. and everything else, he then reiterates and says, he tells them, tell Yaakov this. Here's the message for Yaakov. He tells them, tell our father as follows. Hashem has made me a ruler over all of Egypt. Come down to Egypt now, don't delay. That was the message he sent to Yaakov. 2 parts, 2 statements. Hashem made me the ruler over Egypt. Come down here to Egypt, don't delay. So now, Mizeh muvan, second paragraph. From this, it's understood. Sheyiridas Yaakov avonav legolos Mitzrayim, nu'utza hoysa bekach sheyosef haya moshel v'adon l'chol Mitzrayim. Kolomar sheyosef lo rak sipar ketzad hoyvila ha'hashgachas protis lekach shemchiris Yosef hu sibad levios Mitzrayim ki oz gam Ramaz lahem sha'ayidei zeh sha'kadosh baruch im gam ramaz lahem sha'ayidei zeh sha'kadosh baruch hu samay l'Moshe l'Mitzrayim kvar yachol hiskayim ha'redei gomer v'kavanos kolas Mitzrayim nitna kvar lebitzua. So Yosef was giving them the message that Yaakov and his family coming to Mitzrayim, it's kind of there's a double message here, and part of the message is the reverse of what we might think at face value, because what seems like the message is Hashem made me the ruler of Egypt, so therefore things will be good for you, so come down here. But he already told them that. He already told them that Hashem made me the ruler of Egypt so that you could have food and everything would be good, etc. And then he sends a message to Yaakov and says, Hashem made me the ruler over all of Egypt, come down here. And the message here, the reason why he repeats and reiterates Hashem made me the ruler over all Egypt and then immediately says, come down here, is actually for the reverse message. He's telling him, Hashem made me the leader of all of Egypt. And in order for the purpose of my position as the ruler of all of Egypt to be fulfilled, Hashem made me the ruler of all of Egypt for a reason. And in order for that reason to be fulfilled, you need to come here. So Hashem's plan, which is based upon me being the ruler of all Egypt, also another component that's required for that plan to be fulfilled is for you to come here. So he says, Hashem made me the leader, and therefore is the fine print or the hidden words here. You need to come down to Egypt so that can be fulfilled. The purpose and intention can be fulfilled. The question is why? What's going on here? What's he saying? What's he talking about? What's the message? So let's go back in time a little. Habir Bazeba Pashtus base. We're towards the bottom of the first column in the Hebrew. Kashahidia Kodesh Baruch Hu Avram Avinu b'Bris Bein Absarim Shebonav Yerdu L'Golas Mitzrayim. At the Bris Bein Absarim, the covenant that Hashem made with Avram Avinu, we're going back already several generations. Hashem had already told Avram Avinu that his descendants are going to be strangers in a foreign land and they're going to be oppressed and it's going to be difficult, etc. And then at the end of that, Hashem tells Avram Avinu that they are going to leave that land, that strange land that oppressed them. At the end of this saga, they will leave with great wealth. Just a totally random side note, but really fascinating and powerful, is when Hashem told this to Avram Avinu and told him that your children are going to be slaves, they're going to be oppressed in this strange land, and then afterwards they will leave with great wealth. The Pasuk says, V'hemin b'Hashem, and Avram believed in Hashem, v'yachshaveha l'tzedakah, and he considered this as a charity or as righteous. So Rashi explains, and the basic simple meaning of this is that Avram Avinu believed in Hashem, and Hashem considered it as charity / righteousness that Avram believed in him. Hashem appreciated, let's say, so to speak, Avram believing in him and considered that charity or righteousness. But the Baal Shem Tov has an additional way of interpreting this pasuk that's very, very unconventional, but incredibly powerful. And that is, it's not the actual interpretation, it's the backstory of the interpretation and the message of it. So there's this idea of, bitachon. We all know what bitachon means. Bitachon means trusting in Hashem, that Hashem will do that which is good for us. And not just that which is good for us, deep down, the gamzul latova, this too is for the best kind of good, but the kind of good that we actually want and will appreciate at face value.
How is that like believing so much more than what he was believing before? Like, he started believing when he discovered Hashem, and
It's a good question.
Like
why is this so special?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer off the top of my head, but the Baal Shem Tov's interpretation is going to take care of that completely. But it doesn't answer your question. It's an alternative interpretation. So your question stands. Good question. Good morning. So, but the idea of bitachon and the power of bitachon is such that there's a story with the Tzemach Tzedek. Is everyone familiar with the expression "tracht gut, wird sein gut"? Think good and it will be good. So that comes from the story of the Tzemach Tzedek. There was a chassid who came to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he was completely broken in tears. He had a son who was terminally ill and basically had no hope of surviving and getting better. And the Tzemach Tzedek told him, "Tracht gut, wird sein gut." You think positive, and it will be positive. Your positive thinking will make it be good, will generate a openly, readily, apparently positive outcome. And that's ultimately what bitachon is. Bitachon is trusting in Hashem, trusting and feeling secure in the fact that Hashem will do that which is going to be good for us at face value. And the power of that, of bitachon, is that trach gut wird sein gut. We can actually, bitachon can actually change Hashem's plans. And bitachon can make Hashem give us a positive outcome that he wasn't planning to give us, because tracht gut wird sein gut. Trachting good, thinking positively, having bitachon, actually makes it be good. And if Hashem wasn't planning for it to be good, our bitachon can overwrite that and rewrite Hashem's intention. Kiviyachol. Now, the Baal Shem Tov says, considering the power of bitachon and the fact that if a person has bitachon, that can actually, so to speak, force Hashem's hand and make Hashem do that which is good for us at face value. If there would be an instance in which Hashem planned to punish someone, and that person was having bitachon in that Hashem would not punish them, or Hashem would give them a positive outcome that they don't deserve, the power of that bitachon is so great that if Hashem still wants to do that bad thing to the person, Hashem would need to actually take away the person's ability to have bitachon in order to be able to do something to them. That's how powerful bitachon is. And so the Baal Shem Tov says, the pasuk says, "V'hem in b'Hashem," and Avram Avinu believed in Hashem v'yachshaveh l'tzedakah, and Avram considered the fact that he was able to believe and have faith as a charity from Hashem, knowing that Hashem could take away that ability and might do so if necessary. Now think about what that means in terms of the power of bitachon. Bitachon is so powerful that if someone had bitachon and Hashem didn't want to do what the person had bitachon for, Hashem would need to actually take away that person's ability to have bitachon. That's how powerful it is. Now, just to clarify, that doesn't mean, oh, there's no point in having bitachon because Hashem is going to take it away. It's not the way it works. It's not like that Hashem is casually taking away people's ability to have bitachon left, right, and center. Hashem doesn't do that on a regular basis. Right? Hashem can split the sea. Hashem did split the sea. Hashem could split the sea anytime and every time if he feels like it, but he doesn't. He did it once. It doesn't happen on an ongoing basis. You know, Hashem can take away our ability to have bitachon, but he doesn't. It's not something that we have to, feel like there's no point in trying to have bitachon because Hashem could just take it away. Yeah, Hashem could, but it's not like he does. The point here is emphasizing the power of bitachon is so great that if Hashem didn't want to behave in accordance with our bitachon, he would need kaviyachol, to first take away our ability to have bitachon in order to do the thing that he still wants to do against our bitachon. And that happened by this bris bein absarim, when Hashem, that statement of Avram was when Hashem was telling him that his children are going to be strangers in a foreign land and they're going to be oppressed, etc. And then after that oppression, they are going to leave with great wealth. Sorry?
You have one more copy?
Yes. You're welcome. So now let's get back to when Hashem told Avram Avinu that his children are going to be strangers in a foreign land and they're going to be oppressed, and then afterwards they're going to go out with great wealth. There are a couple of things going on here, because at first it might seem like Hashem is telling him, you know what, like it's going to be tough, but I'll pay them back. I'm going to pay them off. They're going to get a settlement. They're going to come out really wealthy at the end of all of this. Because it's not just that, because the math doesn't add up. right? And it actually says that when Hashem was taking them out and Hashem was emphasizing to to Bnei Yisrael as they were leaving Egypt how important it was that they gather all of this wealth and gather the valuables to take with them. And Hashem was telling them, you have to do this, because if you don't collect these valuables, then Avram Avinu is going to come to me and he's going to say, hang on a second, we had a deal. The deal was, you told me that they're going to be strangers in this foreign land and they're going to be oppressed and then they're going to leave with great wealth. Now, you kept the first part, you didn't keep the second part. Where's the wealth? What's going on here? And so Hashem says, I don't want Avram Avinu complaining to me that I didn't keep my end of the bargain. So you need to gather all these valuables and take them with you. But there has to be more to the picture, because it doesn't add up. There's no way that Avram Avinu would have, chosen or been happy for them to go in order to get this wealth. And, like sometimes in life, in, settlements that happen in secular courts, sometimes a settlement can be a pretty good deal, right? Sometimes someone can get a payout as a settlement for something, and a person will be like, you know what, like, yeah, that was a good deal. Like, if you would ask them, would you do that again for that settlement? Sometimes people might say, yeah, but sometimes not, right? Sometimes even if a person gets a massive settlement, that means that they're set for life financially. If the trauma that they suffered in the event that the settlement was officially a settlement for, whether it was a settlement or whether they sued successfully, whatever it is, there are many times that a person will be like, no way, it's not worth it. Like, sometimes the trauma can have impact for the duration of a person's life. And no amount of money is necessarily worth it, right? Not every settlement is worth the suffering that the settlement is payment for. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not even close. And this is one of those cases. It's not even close. There's no way that the suffering was worth the money. That was not a payment that justified the suffering. So what was going on here? And if Avram Avinu would have had the choice, if Hashem could have said, you know what, like, I could let them go a bit early, but if they go early, they're not going to let the treasure, so I need to let them stay there until the end so that they can get the treasure. Like, come on, no way. There's no way that Avram Avinu would have said, you know what, you promised treasure, you better let them stay there for a bit longer so that they can get the treasure. It's like, forget the treasure, just let them go. The suffering that if you would measure the collective suffering of the entire community, the things that were going on with these people in Egypt was, it wasn't, you talk about slavery. It's not just, they had to work really hard and they didn't get paid. That was like, the least of their problems per se at the time. The things that happened to them were so horrific. It's on par with, the worst persecutions that the Jews have had historically. It's up there, at least in, the top handful of worst persecutions we've ever had. And we've had some pretty bad ones. It's not just that they worked and didn't get paid. It was terrible, terrible suffering. And there's no way that Avram Avinu would have said, yeah, you know what? Let's let it continue till the end to make sure they get paid. It's like, forget the money, just get them out of there. So the payment wasn't just a settlement for the suffering. There's a lot more going on here. And a big part of what was happening when they came out with this money, with this wealth, it wasn't just about, what's the value of money? The immediate value of money is money gives us the leverage or the ability to buy things, right? To purchase, let's say, things and experiences. We can buy things that we want to have, and we can pay for experiences that we want to experience with money. That's what money does. So ultimately, immediately we want money to buy things, but the question then becomes, why do we want to buy things? The reason we want to buy things is in order to experience that which having these things will allow us to experience. So we want money because money facilitates experiences. Ultimately, money facilitates our ability to experience pleasure through things that we buy, to experience security, whatever it is, to experience joy, fun, you name it, and a whole lot of other things, not all of which are positive, but that's a separate can of worms. So the reason that they had to take this wealth out of Mitzrayim was not just in order to be able to have the experiences that that money would afford them, because money does afford experiences. It does. It's very simple. That's the immediate value of money, is its ability to be leveraged to get us experiences. But there was a lot more going on here. And what this goes back to is the purpose of the existence of the universe. Now, there are a number of different elements here that we talk about very frequently. We talk about the purpose of existence being dir b'tachtonim, to make the physical world into a dwelling place for Hashem, to integrate Hashem into physical reality. Another angle on that, another aspect to it, is what we talk about is the terminology is bir hanitzuzos or halas hanitzuzos, refining or elevating sparks. Now, what are these sparks? Now, sparks is obviously a metaphor, a physical spark. And when we talk about ideas like this, everything is pretty much a metaphor. It's all metaphors, because the actual thing that we're addressing and trying to understand is not physical, and it's not something we can tangibly relate to. So we talk about it with metaphors and then, get it as much of it as we can. So when Hashem created the world, when the world was created, there are what are called these Nitsuzas, these sparks of divinity, rapach, 288 sparks of divinity that were embedded into the world. Now, obviously, it's not just like there's 288, because that's not so many. Like, you just need to find them. 288, it's not that much. 288 sparks translates to many, 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 sub sparks, etc. So there is divinity spread throughout the universe. Everything in the world has divinity within it, has these sparks of divinity that were embedded in the world when it was created. And in case anyone's interested, those sparks come from Kalim of the world of Toyo, if that means anything to anyone. Which is not that important to understand. It's fascinating, but it's a whole separate chapter, and it'll take us far off the beaten path here. Even though I do that sometimes, and we're going to do it now to an extent, but let's try to keep it under control. So there are these sparks of divinity embedded within the world, in everything, right? And when we eat food, we make a bracha, we eat kosher food. Number one, just by virtue of making a bracha, we've already taken sparks of divinity in that food and elevated them up to their source and brought them back to where they're supposed to be. And when we elevate those sparks, we, elevate the world in which those sparks are embedded as well, and we integrate divinity into the world. But these specific sparks are different from the divinity that we integrate into the world. It's all divinity, but there's two different parts of the picture. So we're elevating these sparks, we're extracting these sparks. These sparks are not supposed to stay embedded. These sparks, these rapach nitzutzos, these 288 sparks of divinity that were embedded in the world, were not embedded in order because they were ultimately supposed to be there. They were embedded in the world for us to extract them out and elevate them back up. By virtue of doing that, we also integrate divinity into the world. And both of these are sort of two parts of the picture. It's not the same thing. They go hand in hand and they're related. But we are supposed to be elevating these sparks, these 288 sparks. Now, let's go back to the example of food, right? A person eats kosher food, you make a bracha. By virtue of the fact that you make the bracha before you eat, you're automatically elevating some of the sparks in that food. Then when you eat, and right, what happens? We ingest food, we digest it. Our body processes the macronutrients in the food, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the fats. We obtain calories from those nutrients. Our body processes and extracts calories from them. And calories are energy. If we use that energy to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, to work and earn money legitimately and use that money for good things, whatever it is, as we use that energy for positive things, we are now elevating the sparks that are embedded in that energy itself, in the calories, which came from the food. So every part of this picture every time we do something right, we are elevating sparks that are embedded in different parts of the world, in the parts of the world that we are integrating with, that we are working with and interacting with, is the word that I meant to use. So as we interact with the world in the right way, and we use different parts of the world for the right things, we are elevating these sparks that are embedded. And that's ultimately what everything is about. It's all about our existence. The existence of the universe is about the elevation of these sparks. Now, one of the things one second. So this is, we're going to jump here. Okay, so and when we talk about this idea of elevating the sparks in the world, this is really a focus of Golus, the idea of exile, of us being in Golus and, doing the things we do in Golus. The point of Golus is halas hanitsuzas, for us to elevate these sparks of divinity that are embedded in the world. And the original Golus, the first instance of Golus, of exile, was in Mitzrayim, the exile in Egypt. Now, the point of that Golus Mitzrayim, exile in Egypt, was to gather up all the sparks of divinity that were embedded in the land of Egypt and everything within the land of Egypt, and to extract them, to elevate them, to bring them out. Now, it just so happens that of the 288 sparks, 202 of them were elevated through the exile in Egypt. And as we left Egypt, it says, the Pasuk says, Vagam Erev Rav, the great multitude went out with them. The Erev Rav, the great multitude, refers to these people who sort of tagged along and became Jewish because they were scared, etc. And a lot of them didn't have the right intent, and they never really meant well and caused a lot of trouble. But the word Rav has the numerical value. Reish is 200, base is 2, so Rav is 202. And when it says also Erev Rav, the great multitude, Erev, this mixture of 202, Allah went up from Egypt with them, refers to the fact that when we left Egypt, we extracted and elevated these 202 out of the 288 sparks of divinity that were embedded in the world. A huge percentage of that, the 202, were in Egypt, and that's taken care of, which interestingly aligns very closely with the fact that halachically we're not supposed to go back and live in Egypt. And that happens to align very nicely with this, that it makes sense that our work in Egypt is done. Our work in Golus of extracting these sparks in Egypt was taken care of. Erev Rav, these 202 sparks already went out with us, so we have no business there. We have no reason to be there.
What's the significance of the remaining 86? Like how distributed?
It's a good question. I don't know that we have, a record of the specific allocation and distribution, but that's what we've been dealing with since then, is the other 86. So this was clearly a very, very, a disproportionately effective period of extracting and elevating sparks, because in those, couple centuries, they did, more than 80%. No, less than 80%. That would be 250. 75-ish%.
So if elevating sparks, is it just to deal with like neshamas or what?
It's not just neshamas, it's things. It's eating food, saying a bracha, using the calories for a mitzvah. It's
so if it's this Rav are the ones that came out, then are they not the ones that were so with the cow?
Yeah, no, it's two separate things. We're not saying that the literal area of Rav were the 202 sparks. We're saying it's a second meaning of the pasuk. So the area of Rav, the great multitude, went up with them from Egypt. Also, the area of Rav, this mixture of 202 sparks, went up with them. It's two separate things. We're not saying that the area of Rav are the 202 sparks. It's two separate meanings. Yeah, they caused a lot of problems, including the golden calf. So everything we do, you light Shabbos candles, the sparks that are in the wax or the oil and in the wick and in the match and in the food you ate that you got the energy from with which to strike the match, etc., etc. All of that, the sparks and all of that gets elevated through that mitzvah. So this is true of everything.
Do you elevate sparks?
That's a good question.
I saw that they're illegal.
Sorry?
I saw that they were already illegal.
Yes. So when I say we, I mean collectively since Yetzias Mitzrayim have been working since Mitzrayim. Collectively, we've been working on elevating the rest of the sparks.
Are they elevating now?
Yes.
So what are we doing?
Good question. There was one point when the Frierdiker Rebbe said that, the work is basically done. We just need to polish our buttons, which is a metaphor for, in the military, there's a very strong emphasis on, being dressed properly and everything has to be pressed and starched and polished and all that, And he was saying that it's like the clothes are ready, everything's pressed, starched, all put on, everything, just need to polish the buttons, the last detail. And then later he said that the buttons themselves are also already polished. And then the Rebbe says that after that, the Rebbe said things along the lines of, we just have to basically accept Mashiach. Like Mashiach's ready to happen. Mashiach's here. We just need to actually accept Mashiach and allow him into our lives. We say that we do.
Too long.
We say that. The question is, to what degree do we mean that deep down in a real, genuine way? And I'm not saying that as a criticism or an accusation. I'm just saying, generally speaking, right? I think it's fair to say that all of us could accept Mashiach into our lives in a deeper and more authentic way than we already do. And really want it and be open to Mashiach actually happening. It's not uncommon for people to feel, and it's less common for people to say because no one wants to admit it. But everyone's like, yeah, Mashiach's really cool, but like maybe next week, I'm like working on a couple things. I've got something really exciting. We all know that I'm going to lose interest in that thing when Mashiach comes. So maybe like next week when I get back from vacation, because if Mashiach comes down, I'm not going to want to go on vacation. I've been planning this for ages. That kind of thing. It's like Mashiach, we should all, and I say that half lightheartedly, obviously, but for us to, and it's more, and acknowledge the fact that Mashiach is the intent of, Mashiach was always the intention of reality and of existence. And Mashiach is built into the fabric of the world. It's just, it's the work's done, and it's on us to say, yes, accept that as reality, accept that as the purpose, accept it, really want it, and allow it into our lives. And that's really the barrier at the moment.
Is it going to be a collective acceptance or just individual? Because if it's individual, it's just going to take forever.
It's a good question. The Rebbe said that if 3 people, I think he said, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but the Rebbe said if 3 people would scream Ad Masai and really, really actually mean it, like for real, Mashiach would come. Does that mean that when people say, I want Mashiach, they're lying? No, it doesn't mean they're lying, but it means that there are layers of depth and authenticity. And, saying I want Mashiach because I'm sick of being broke, or because someone who I love is not feeling well and they want them to feel better. It's not really what Mashiach's about. That's not I want Mashiach. That's like I want this person to feel better, or I want more money. And when Mashiach comes, we won't be broke and no one will be sick. So I want Mashiach. That's not called wanting Mashiach. That's called wanting people to be healthy and wanting to not be broke. Right. Wanting Mashiach is, I want Mashiach even if everybody was wealthy and life was good and everyone was healthy and everything was amazing and there was no persecution and everyone, and not just it's so hard to be observant and to follow Torah mitzvahs because of all the challenges, because then we don't want Mashiach. We want to not have to have the difficulties of the challenges. It's like, imagine if all of that was good and we would still say, no, we need to have Mashiach. Life's good and we're all managing to be observant without challenges and without issues, and everyone's healthy and everyone has everything what they need. If life was perfect physically, materially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all perfect smooth sailing, we would still be desperate for Mashiach to come, because that's the point and that's what it's all about. That's real Admosai.
Isn't that the Poseidon olive, right?
Yes, 100%. Very good.
Where is the concept of like? I remember like since I was a kid, I was told of like it's a really cute concept. Like the all Jews would keep shop on Shabbos all together, and she has to
Medrash, I think it's a Gemara.
They would just like keep Shabbos.
Well, I mean, there have been massive projects in recent years, the Shabbos 500 and whatever. Go for it. If you organize it, I'll post it on my Facebook page and Instagram. Yeah. Right. So, there are levels of depth and authenticity in Admosai. It's not saying that people who say it don't really mean it and they're lying or faking, but, what was that?
No, I'm saying like practically, I don't think it's real and it's not so possible nowadays that we live like with different distractions. Not
What,
distraction,
the
like-
Admosai you're talking about?
Yeah, like really mean it. I think it's like.
It's not just that. It's the fact that we're human. Like,
So.
we're very, very complex creatures, human beings, very complex.
Yeah.
For some reason, Hashem decided it was a good idea to make us complicated. But, so the point of this, now, we mentioned that there was this clearly very disproportionate success or effectiveness in elevating sparks in Mitzrayim, right? Because they got like 75-ish% of the sparks. Yeah, something like that. Ish. Anyways, no, it's driving me crazy. I have to work this out because otherwise I'm going to be thinking about it in the back of my head while I'm trying to teach this. Sorry. 202 divided by 288. 70%. 70.14%. So 70% of the sparks were done over those couple centuries. And then the other 30% we were working on for millennia afterwards. One of the reasons that happened is, and this is part of what Yosef is saying, Hashem made me a ruler over Egypt and effectively ruler, sort of, in some ways, the effective ruler of the whole sort of known world or the whole region for sure. Because how did Yosef become ruler? Yosef became ruler because he had a plan. He came up with a plan to store the grain during the years of plenty so that they'd have food during the famine. And then what happened? Everybody came from all over to come and buy food. And Yosef basically accumulated on behalf of the nation of Egypt, the king, the entire wealth of the region. Because people came and gave everything they had for grain. And so Yosef's telling them, Yosef says, Hashem made me the ruler over Egypt in order to bring all of this wealth under the umbrella of Egypt. Hashem did this so I could concentrate all of this wealth under the umbrella of Egypt, so that over the course of the slavery and the Exodus, we could then extract the sparks from all of this accumulated wealth and elevate it. And this is in part practically and also represented by us taking this wealth out of Egypt, extracting literal wealth from Egypt. And so Hashem was saying, you've got to extract this wealth, because if not, Avram Avinu is going to come and say, well, you put them there and you didn't take out the wealth. His issue is not going to be, oh, you didn't get the settlement that you deserved. Because the settlement wasn't fair payment anyways, just payment. That was never the point. And if that was the point of Avram Avinu's claim that he would have made, he would have said, you know what, let them go earlier and forget the wealth. Like, it's not worth it. That's not the issue. The issue was you put them there in order to extract these sparks, because that was the mission and that's what needed to be done. And then they didn't even do that properly and take the wealth containing the sparks with them. What's the point of that? It's like, just Imagine going undercover, I mean, in some ways it might be a good analogy, just popped into my head. You know, imagine that someone trains to go undercover as a spy in a different country because there's a really, really, really important resource that you need to get, and it's, you know, it's a threat to the security of the country, and so the government sends someone and they train them as a spy, and it's very dangerous, and they go and they spend 20 years of their life undercover in this country, and every minute literally is a threat. And you know, this is a thing that some spies have to do is, you know, for example, go to sleep with sleeping pills every night to make sure that they're in a deep sleep and they don't talk in their sleep, because they talk in their sleep, they get busted, they're dead. That's the kind of life these people are living on a day-to-day basis, minute to minute, in fear of being discovered and tortured. And a person spends 20 years of their life like that because they understand the importance of obtaining this resource, getting this thing that's a threat to their whole country. And then they're about to get it and they walk in the room and they have it and they're like, oh, okay, whatever, turn around and leave. It's like, what are you, mad? You just lived life of a difficult, painful life for 20 years to get this, and then you're just going to walk away without taking it when it's right there for the taking. That's kind of like what this is like. It's like you need to take the wealth with you. That was the whole point. The whole point of going there was to interact and to extract the sparks and elevate them. And part of that is going to happen in these resources that haven't yet been extracted. Some of the sparks in the land and in permanent resources have been extracted, but there are still sparks in this movable wealth, and you need to take it with you to continue that extraction. So Avram Avinu is going to come to him and say, you put them there and they didn't even take the wealth with them. They didn't even do the job. What was the point? You put them through all this pain and suffering for no point even? And that's what Hashem was saying. If you leave now, Avraham Avinu is going to be mad, not because you didn't get paid or a settlement. The settlement isn't worth it anyways. It's not the point. Avraham Avinu would rather you leave sooner without the settlement. The issue is he's going to be like, you know, we do this and you do this for a reason, and there's a purpose that justifies it. And, you know, when someone goes out and acts as a spy for 20 years, they're doing it because they understand the importance and the purpose and the value of the mission, and they're prepared to do it because of that. As hard as it is, they understand the value. But if you're going to do that and make that commitment and walk away without even doing what was the whole point of that commitment in the first place, like, what's the point of that? That's what Hashem was saying Avram Avinu's complaint is going to be. They're going to go and do all of this in order to extract these sparks. I get it. I'm not happy about it, but I understand that's what we hear, and I understand it needs to be done. But then for them to leave without even taking that wealth, and they're going to leave those sparks behind, like, how dumb is that? And that's why Yosef was saying, Yosef had already told them, Hashem put me here to give you food and all these things. And when he said to Yaakov, Hashem made me a leader over all of Egypt, now come down, he wasn't just saying, you can come down now because, you know, I got you. Because he already told them that. He was saying, Hashem made me a leader over all of Egypt to accumulate and concentrate all of this wealth under the umbrella of Egypt. Now, in order for those sparks to be extracted, you got to come down here, and we got to start the next part of this process to make that happen. And just to understand, you know, and Avram Avinu, despite, you know, Avram's obvious displeasure at the pain and suffering that his descendants were going to go through, he understood the value, he understood the meaning and the purpose. And as long as the extraction was going to happen, he was able to make his peace with it, and he was able to accept it. His only issue was going to be if after all that, it's not even going to happen. Like, no, I'm sorry. That's not cool. That is not cool. And so Hashem was like, you guys got to make this happen, because Avram Avinu is going to be really upset if you don't. Now, you know, I want to go on a bit of a tangent here just to illustrate this, you know, to make it a little bit more tangible. And because so far all of this is like, that's great, that's the purpose of existence, and like, it's a nice idea, and on a good day we can be really motivated by that. But like, you know, sometimes like it would be nice if there was a little bit more in it for us and not just the purpose. And the answer is that there's everything in it for us on the line. You know, and a similar example to this, and I'd call it an analog rather than an analogy, is one of the reasons that is given for why Hashem created the world was Hashem created the world to make us partners in creation. Creation means to be creative, to do something new, right? To create means to make something exist that didn't exist previously. Hashem created us to achieve, to make new things happen, to make change, to be partners in creation, in creating and making something new, making something different that wasn't there before. And Hashem doesn't just do that because he needs a partner, because Hashem doesn't need a partner. Hashem could do it himself if he wanted to. Hashem left that for us to give us the opportunity to be his partners. And, and the fact that our purpose of existence is to be partners in creation is built so deeply into our physiology that, it's a very practical approach. Sometimes if someone's feeling useless, feeling down, low self-esteem, one of the most powerful things that a person can do is a couple of variations of this, but to go out and make a difference, to do something that's going to make a difference, make a constructive change for ourselves and or for other people. Go out and help people, volunteer to help people, or take on a challenge and say, there's this thing that I can't do. It's really hard for me, but I want to do it. I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to work every day towards getting to this goal. And both of these approaches have a very deep physiological impact. It affects, the balance of the neurotransmitters in our central nervous system, in our brain. It affects the balance of hormones in our blood. It's a very, very real, tangible, measurable physiological outcome that results from being productive, from making a difference, from being creative. Why? Because that's why we exist, and it's built into our physiology. It's not just a woo-woo, nice, fluffy thing. It's built into our physiology that being productive and making a difference actually changes the balance of our neurotransmitters and our hormones, and it changes the way we feel, and it can have a tremendous impact on mental health in a very real way. And it also can really help build up a person's confidence. Sometimes when a person has issues with self-esteem, there are approaches from working on the inside, and sometimes it's just a matter of, if someone's like, oh yeah, I'm useless, I'm so bad, I'm not good at anything, and you say, it's not true, you're amazing. What are they going to say? They say, shut up. No, I'm not. Right? When someone feels like that, is in that frame of mind, they don't need you most of the time. Sometimes we just fish for compliments and we're like, oh, I'm so bad. And you're like, no, you're amazing. You're like, oh, thanks. Right? Yeah, we all do that sometimes. But when a person's really feeling down and really feeling bad about themselves, they don't need us to come and say, oh, you're so amazing. They're going to say, shut up. I'm not. No, I'm not. What are you saying? They don't feel like that. Telling them isn't going to help. But proving it is, getting out and doing something that makes them feel, wow, you know what? I did make a difference. I did do something. I did create. I did enact a change. That actually shows them, and that has an impact on our neurotransmitters and our hormones and our mental health and our emotional health and our frame of mind and our consciousness and our well-being, confidence in our well-being and our consciousness also, incidentally. Why? Because that's the reason we exist. If that's the reason we exist, it's built into our physiology, and doing that is going to be compatible with an ideal state of health. And the same thing is true here. We are built and created to use every part of the world for its purpose, to extract and elevate the sparks that are embedded in it. And doing that, number one, that's the whole reason for the exodus, for the Golos in Egypt, and it's also the reason for the subsequent exiles. Any moment of exile has a purpose and a reason. And that purpose and reason, yes, the purpose is primarily about, Hashem's side of the picture. Hashem did it for this reason with this intent, and that should be our primary motivating factor. But you know what? Sometimes we could use a little help and a little more than just that's the purpose and reason. That's what Hashem wants, and that's why we need to do it. And the fact is that when something is the purpose of our existence and it's the reason we exist, it's also built into the physiology of our well-being. It's built into the mechanics of our well-being. And the fact is that being involved in extracting these sparks, number one, it fulfills the purpose of the universe. It fulfills our purpose. And when we fulfill our purpose, that is built into the mechanics of our well-being. And ultimately, we will end up healthier and happier and better off and more confident, etc., and more satisfied and more fulfilled as a result of this, because this is the reason that we exist. The reason we exist is to elevate sparks. And the same way, you know, that Avram Avinu, Hashem said, if you guys don't elevate these sparks, don't extract these sparks, Avram Avinu is going to be mad. Because if we get the job done, he will at least accept the fact that the outcome, as painful as it was, justifies the cost. But if you're not even going to extract the sparks, he's going to be really mad. Which means that the extraction of the sparks justifies it. And Avram Avinu was able to accept it because that made it at least acceptable, even if still painful. And it's that focus on extracting sparks that justifies all the negativity, etc. That's why we are here. That's why Golus exists. The concept of Golus exists, not for us to sit and be scared in a corner and say, oh, Golus, no, I'm just going to hide. And the point of it is to get out there and to elevate those sparks, interact with, walk past someone on the street and give them a genuine smile and say good morning, especially in a place where New York City, where approximately 0 people ever do that. You change someone's day and you can elevate some sparks, by doing that. Everything we do, giving tzedakah, going to work and using the money for the right things, eating and using the energy for the right things, having some downtime, some me time, because it's going to be good for our well-being and empower us to do what we need to do more effectively. That in and of itself is elevating sparks, because that's doing something, or that will, when we go and do the things afterwards, that elevates the sparks of what we did, of that me time, of that self care, etc. It's not just mitzvahs, because everything's connected. Anything we do that contributes to our well-being and our ability to do Torah mitzvahs healthily and energetically and happily and properly and functionally is all a part of that chain reaction and that process. And the sparks throughout all of that process gets uplifted through our Torah mitzvahs. So Hashem didn't put us in Golus to be afraid of Golus. We do have to be strong and not be influenced by the Golus, but it doesn't mean we should hide from it. It means we should engage the Golus, know what we stand for, engage and confront the Golus proudly and boldly and confidently, and find every opportunity to elevate sparks, because the sparks are the whole purpose of the Golus. Find every opportunity to interact, to engage with a person, with a thing. Find a way to use something for something good. Find a way to involve things and people in good things. And by doing so, we elevate the sparks and extract the sparks, which are the whole purpose of the Golus and which justify the Golus, and which were enough to allow Avram Avinu to accept all of that, because that's the purpose. L'chaim.
Question from
Yeah, let me just cut the